So the voting will, of course, come to an end in some time from now. The counting of votes has begun in some parts of the United States of America. And the question that everyone has on the top of their minds is who will be America's next president. But this is not the only election that is happening in the United States. The voters have also been casting their ballot for the congressional elections as well. So here's a report giving you a lowdown on the U.S. Congress elections.
Along with the president, the US is picking lawmakers for the House of Representatives and one-third of the Senate. The voters will decide which party controls both the chambers of US Congress. The congressional elections are also a close race.
We will make America great again. Thank you, Pittsburgh. God bless you.
Beginning with the Senate, 34 of a total of 100 seats in the upper house are up for election. As is protocol, only one-third of the seats go to polls at a time. Total term of the Senate is 6 years, and as per rotational timeline, a third of the seats are up for election every 2 years. Currently, Democrats are the ruling party in the Senate, and this is where the numbers stand. Out of 100 seats, Democrats have 47 and 4 independents allied to them, giving the blue camp a majority of 51. Republicans are just 2 seats short, with the remaining 49 in their control. In the House of Representatives, all 435 seats are on the ballot. As required, polls for the lower house happen every 2 years, once during presidential election year, once in the middle of the presidential term. And so the cycle continues. At the moment, Republicans control the House of Representatives. This is where the numbers stand. Out of 435, the red camp has the majority at 220 seats. Democrats, on the other hand, have 212 representatives, while 3 seats are vacant. Much like the presidential race, the congressional election can also turn out to be one for the history books. Trends and polls leading up to the final election day reveal that there is a possibility for a historic flip in mandate. Predictions and political analysts say that the House of Representatives could flip from Republican to Democratic control, while the Senate may see a vice versa flip from Democratic to Republican control. If this happens, then it will be the first time in more than 230 years of US congressional elections that both chambers of Congress will have changed majority control in the opposite direction. In the larger scheme of things, the Congress is responsible for proposing and passing laws in the US, which is why both Democratic and Republican presidential nominees consider it pivotal to control the chambers. With all the races so close, parties and their candidates, along with the rest of the world, are watching these triple elections with bated breath. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, so this, of course, is the moment of truth for the people in America. Millions of them have stepped out since this morning. They've walked to the voting stations, the polling booths, and they've cast their ballots to elect the next president. And to help us make sense of what is happening at this moment, we're being joined by Mr. Lincoln Mitchell, who's a professor in the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. He's joining us live from New York. Now, Professor Mitchell, let me in fact start off by asking you this. At this moment, we are in the final hours before the polling ends across the United States of America, and still no one can stick their neck out and predict as to what has actually been happening in this election. It is being dubbed as a contest that is still neck and neck. In your assessment, why do you think the pollsters at this moment are still not able to predict as to who could be winning this contest?
Well, it is neck and neck. And, you know, the tools we have for measuring or predicting elections are good, but they're not perfect. And an election this close, all the polls can tell us is that it's going to be very close, which we knew, of course, before we started doing the polls. So a poll that says, let's say in Pennsylvania, I think in Pennsylvania, the latest polling average shows Kamala Harris up 0.9%. So not even 1% if you combine the polls. that basically just means it's too close to call. And no pollster is going to say, I'm 100% sure based on data like that. Some of the other data we're seeing, particularly over the weekend, early voting, and, this state is heavy, this state is not, it's more Democrats in this state. That data is even more meaningless. So we are, in a matter of speaking, we are trying to measure an amoeba with a yardstick here. We just don't have the tools until we start counting the votes in some of these states.
Interesting. Now, Donald Trump, when he cast his vote earlier today, he said, according to him, the most important issue that the people in the United States of America face is that of illegal immigration to the United States. The second issue, according to his priority, he said, was that of inflation in a badly managed economy under Joe Biden. Do you think these are the two big issues for which the American people have voted? Or do you think the Democrats have got it right, where they're saying that this is an election more about, abortion rights for women and about fighting fascism in the United States of America?
That's right. That we will find out. Inflation is a huge issue for everybody. But the question is, some voters understand a couple things. Inflation is not something created by Biden and Harris economic policies. Inflation was created by global conditions, including COVID and the war in Ukraine. And that, in fact, the COVID recovery in the United States has been, compared to other countries, quite robust. The migrant crisis is something different because when we talk about immigration, and like so many other issues in America, including crime, what we're really talking about is race. And a lot of voters understand that. So and this is the bet that the Harris campaign is making, while they're not crazy about what's happening, they understand that migrants are not coming into our cities and killing people, and they're not committing crimes in these massive numbers. So when Trump says that, I think voters who are primed to believe and fear that, brown and black people are marauding throughout the United States are going to vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. The hope that Harris is making is that the majority of Americans live in reality rather than in a kind of a racist fear and will support her. And the issue of democracy is very important. And the issue of reproductive freedom, which is, it's about abortion rights, but it's also about women being able to be in control of their own lives. And Harris has it very hard. And I will just tell you anecdotally, I've talked to a lot of older white women who are not lifetime Democrats who are voting for Harris. And these are older women on that issue. So we'll see who wins. But I think they're both making compelling arguments, but speaking to very different parts of the electorate in very different ways. And the question is, who will get those who are kind of pulled in both directions when they walk into the polling place today.
We'll talk about each of those separate issues individually, but first I want to start off with this issue of inflation. Now, Joe Biden was in charge for the last 4 years. Kamala Harris was the vice president. The American administration says that the economy has actually been growing, but inflation has been a big issue, and governments get voted back to power if they've changed the lives of the people for the better. And here a lot of Americans are saying, even if the American economy has been growing, the pinch of inflation, of the ability of the average American household to put food on the table, has actually diminished in the last 4 years. How do you convince people like that in the United States of America to vote Kamala Harris again?
Well, inflation is a problem, is a real problem. And to some extent, Biden hurt himself by not really confronting that. And he would say it's not a problem, or he just wouldn't talk about it. However, a lot of the Biden economic policies, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a funny thing because it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, it's really about climate change, but it's really a jobs program. And when you combine that with the Infrastructure Act, you see essentially a massive jobs program of a kind, we really haven't seen in my lifetime. And I'm not so young anymore. So that is one way to convince people that the economy is going well. The other thing that both Biden, when he was, before he got out of the race, and of course Kamala Harris now have said is, remember Trump's economy. To some extent, this election is about the people who have chosen to believe that Donald Trump created the greatest economy ever, and those who remember 2020, where Trump's almost deliberate mishandling of the COVID crisis really devastated the American economy. So this is about who chooses to remember what, and this is about the extent to which each party can persuade people of their way of seeing the world. But there is an economic rationale for sending Kamala Harris back to the White House.
Right. Now, just to dwell on that question of jobs, you say that more jobs being created, but the fact of the matter is, the minimum wage in the United States of America has stagnated for more than a decade. And this is something that a lot of people within the United States say that more should have been done by different administrations, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were in charge for the last 4 years. But very little has in fact been done to address the problems for people who earn in the minimum wage. have been
That's
done
well. There's
by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
Right. There's the minimum wage, and then there's the question of real wage growth, which are slightly different issues. So the federal minimum wage has not gone up substantially in many years. Now, different states will have, or cities will have higher minimum wages. And many people, including me, believe that early in Biden's presidency, he should have pushed for a higher federal minimum wage. I think that was a mistake. And I think if he'd done that, Harris would be in a much better shape than she is today. The other is is real wage growth, which has also stagnated. But this is something that hurts all incumbents. It hurt Trump in 2020. It hurt, every incumbent who, whether they win or lose, they have to run on this because the wage gap and the wealth gap and the income gap in the United States keeps growing.
Right.
I think the argument Harris is trying to make here is who do you think will do better to fix this? Trump's economic policy is tariffs, which will and she's been very effective on this. She's reframed tariffs as a tax on the American people. It's not technically a tax, it's technically a tariff, but it's a de facto tax. And I've heard some of her radio ads, interestingly enough, aimed at African American voters, who, of course, a key part of her constituency, particularly in states like Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, where, the announcer, the person in the ad says, look around at everything you buy in your house, and if it's made in China, if Donald Trump is president, it'll be 40% more expensive. So I think the failure of Donald Trump to articulate any kind of an economic vision other than we're going to stop migrants coming across the border,
right,
which will only make prices go up more because migrants, frankly, do a lot of low-paid work, right? We're going to put tariffs on people, which are only going to make inflation worse, and that somehow, because of his just genius and business acumen, he'll solve the problem. We've seen that slogan, Trump will fix it. But the question is that getting any traction outside of his base? And, Trump's never gotten more than about 46% of the American people, 47% supporting him. And he may not do it this time either. He's got to get past.
But when you look at surveys which say that 7 out of 10 Americans feel that America is not on the right path, and they're talking about this financially, they're talking about this socially, and a lot of people think that things are actually not happening in America as they would expect them to happen. And then Donald Trump comes in and says that, listen, the reason why you're suffering what you're suffering is because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and I'll come and fix it. Trust me, I'll make the economy be better. And a lot of Americans, in fact, let me just complete the question here. A lot of Americans, in fact, feel that if Donald Trump were to be back in charge of the White House, they would have better economic prospects, which is one of the reasons why even black men seem to be voting for Donald Trump rather than for Kamala Harris.
I think you have to get the data right here. Black men, when you hear that black men are voting for Trump, what you hear is he might get as high as 18% of the black male vote, right?
Right.
How Kamala Harris will drub Donald Trump among black men, probably even more than, it probably will get over 80%. A media narrative was created around that, but there's no data to support that. Watch the exit polls. She'll beat him probably 4-1 among black men, higher among black women. Remember, hold on. And when you say you make a point,
then I'll give you the data.
Okay, I'm going to make a couple points here. A lot of people who are answering the country's going in the wrong direction, I'm talking about people I know, it's because they think Trump is a fascist and it's a fascist threat. And then you have this issue. You're absolutely right about the economy, kind of. But many people who are concerned about the economy look at Donald Trump and say, this guy will make it worse, like he did last time. So all those things are true. But that's why the race is deadlocked, right? I think where I think I agree with you is a stronger Republican candidate. If this is, I don't know, Nikki Haley or someone like that, I think the Republicans probably win this race. At the end of the day, and I said this, I think the day after the election in 2020 or 2022, Trump is the only Republican who would really be losing this race. I mean, to some extent, the Republicans nominated the worst candidate they could, because a rational candidate who could speak to those economic concerns, as all presidential candidates try to do, without the fascism, without the race baiting, without the vulgarity, without the threats, without the ignorance, without the felony convictions, you could get to, and frankly, providing better solutions. I think most voters. Yeah, go ahead.
You asked for the data about how black men and especially members of the black community are voting. In 2016, the number of black men who were voting for Donald Trump was about 6%. In 2020, that number went up to 8%. Now, in 2024, that number is expected to go up to 18%. And a lot of this, according to a lot of the analysts who are talking to this strata of society, the reason why this is happening is because Donald Trump is promising the members of the black community in the United States of America a better life, which the Democrats have failed to do so. And
let me tell you something.
Also want to be upwardly mobile in society, which is why they seem to be shifting to the right. How do you explain that?
Okay, but you're remember, every election cycle we hear this. Every election cycle. Because Republicans because the media here in America doesn't want to be tagged, doesn't want to recognize the degree of racial polarization. Every election cycle. Now, black men represent about 40% of the black vote, not 50 the way it is for other groups because of the high incarceration rates among black men. Secondly, after a strong campaign, that number will go down. I think Trump could get 15% of the black male vote, but that is hardly saying he has a broad appeal to black voters. Quite the opposite. And I would argue that to the extent he's getting that vote from black men, it's not on economic issues. We don't have the data as to why. It's clear Trump is making an argument that the economy is terrible, obviously. That's what every non-incumbent does. There's nothing new there, right? The question is, will it get traction? And the answer is, we won't know. We know it's gotten some traction. We don't know if it's gotten, enough to get over the hump until, all the votes are counted in the next, 48 hours or something. But I don't think this is that unusual. I think the issue here is that he has failed to articulate. If he had come in and said, here's the problem with the economy, here's what I'm going to do, he might be in a better place. But when he gets to what I'm going to do, it's ideas that are just kind of dismissed. Nobody thinks.
Professor, we're running out of time. I just want to get one more question from you. We're running out of time. I just want to get one more question from you. Now, the two big issues that Kamala Harris and her campaign have gone to town are, one is abortion, where she will get a lot of traction with the women voters, and the other is about saving democracy, saving the United States of America from a descent into authoritarianism and fascism under Donald Trump, as her campaign has been saying. But saving democracy is a pretty vague concept. And when you contrast that, and when you pitch that against people who want to have a better standard of living, people who want to earn more, people who want to send their children to college, people who want to see them have the ability to pay for their medical bills. The reason why
you're creating this very odd false dichotomy.
No, it is not a false dichotomy. Very odd false dichotomy. Is between saving democracy in the United States and improving their financial
but she's doing those things.
People will choose.
She's doing all those things. I think the American people can look around and say somebody's talking seriously about policy, and the other isn't talking seriously about anything. This notion that Donald Trump's appeal is because he's offering people a better life, that's not really what's going on here. That's not really what his appeal is based on.
So that's a misrepresentation
of it. And to
suggest
what do you think his appeal
is based on, very quickly.
I think his appeal is based on a sense of personal grievance, which he then expands to essentially a large segment of the population that looks around and says, America is a country for white, Christian, straight people, and everyone else has second-tier citizenship. And there's a lot of Americans who are saying, no, America is a country for everybody. And that is the key difference between these parties.
All right.
And when you get into these discussions of the economy, there are many, many voters who are looking around and saying, I'm a small business person. I like Kamala Harris's program. I want to go to college. I like her ideas about keeping community college affordable. I can't afford health care. Right. Major issue.
All right. We're completely out of time. I think you've made a point, but this is essentially the debate which the people in the United States of America are having. But we're completely out of time, Professor. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
That perspective there. Pleasure speaking with you. This is, of course, a debate that will be settled in the next 48, 72 hours. And we'll get to know as to which way the American people have, of course, voted. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.